Well, usually it's technological advances in weaponry that change a battlefield, but with the Gaza Strip, it's actually a tech downgrade that has changed the dynamics of the conflict between Israel and Hamas. Simple incendiary devices tied to kites and balloons launched from Gaza are setting Israeli fields ablaze. And as both Israel and Hamas are grappling with the wave of aerial attacks, it underscores just how combustible the simmering Gaza situation remains without any movement toward a more permanent stabilization of the impoverished Palestinian enclave. Well, joining us in studio is Avi Melamed, Salisbury Fellow of Intelligence and Middle East Affairs at the Eisenhower Institute. And Avi, here you have a situation. Israel is faced with the, let's say, short-term challenge of how to deal with this new security threat, and at the same time, without risking a much broader conflict. How should Israel approach this problem, both from the military and from the political side?
I think Israel was approaching it quite well, because in the end of the day, it's a limited means, sort of speaking, in the context of the Israeli-Hamas overall conflict. Hamas thought it has a kind of like a magic card in his hand using these balloons and kites. To a certain extent, it was correct, to the point Hamas started receiving the messages that basically Israel's patience is running off. So it was a kind of like another yet limited mean in the story, but in the end of the day, I think thus far, the way Israel was conducting its behavior towards that specific challenge was quite wise.
How can Israel walk that line, though, when you have a low-tech weapon like this that is often sent even by kids? Same problem, really, that was with protests on the border, of managing that without harming civilians that, I mean, you can, depending where you fall, decide innocent or not, but still, kids, teens.
That's the reason I'm saying Israel was doing it quite wisely, because in the end of the day, you could notice that along this period of time, Israel was very cautious to avoid collateral damage. So it was using all kind of like tactical means in order to try and to deter or to stop that phenomenon.
But isn't this all just a Band-Aid until the next thing, until the next kind of weapon, until the next conflict?
It is all a Band-Aid, you're right. I mean, when you look at the situation in Gaza Strip, look, when you look from a Hamas perspective, Hamas is not monolithical. If there is one thing all people of Hamas agree is that Hamas is in a dire situation, in a deep crisis. Now, the inner challenge of Hamas is the rivalry between two major camps. One camp says, like, the way to get out of this crisis is by more crisis. The other camp says, like, no, the way to get out of this crisis is not by more crisis, it's by finding some kind of like mechanism that we will be able to compromise on. The other thing is that there is a camp in Hamas that says we should try to turn into the Iranians because they are the only one that could offer us anything. The other camp says, like, no, you shouldn't go to the Iranians because basically it means more of a dire situation. So in the end of the day, you are looking at a situation where you're totally right. This is yet another milestone, sort of speaking, in the way. But in the end of the day, here is what we have to take into consideration. There are 2 million people in Gaza Strip. Hamas is not going anywhere. The last shuttle to the moon left the other night. And any kind of arrangement, in the end of the day, in Gaza Strip, can be done only in the frame of a regional framework.
Well, if you're talking regional framework, and you just described such a split within Hamas itself, another issue that certainly the Palestinian Authority sees as very important is a unity government between Fatah and Hamas that has been tried again and again and again. Each time has failed. Yesterday in Ramallah, I sat down with Dr. Nabil Shad. He's the senior foreign policy advisor to Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. This is what he told me about prospects for real reconciliation between Fatah and Hamas.
There are foreign factors that interfere in the calculus of Hamas about the unity. But that is going to end. And my firm belief is that sooner or later, and I hope sooner, we will end that separation and we will go back to a democratically elected unity government. Once you start cutting a country into pieces, it becomes tragic, much more difficult. And we will put every effort possible to make it happen. Of course, based on a political program that leads to peace with Israel. I mean, we don't want our unity to become, to create a new difficulty. We have to agree with Hamas on a political program about nonviolence and about the commitment to peace.
Avi, whether it leads to peace with Israel, certainly a unity government could stabilize the situation in Gaza, could open up some of the broad border crossings if, for example, the Palestinian Authority takes control. But we've heard this tune so many times before. Is there any reason, any geopolitical signs, conditions that make that prospect more promising now?
Yes, I would say so. A couple of things. First, Hamas crisis. Second, the Gaza people crisis. Third, the crisis within the Palestinian Authority and the question who is going to take the place of the Palestinian president once he's not here anymore. Fourth, the situation in Egypt. Fifth, the story of the Gulf monarchies and the growing tension between Saudi Arabia and Iran. These are all regional envelopes, sort of speaking, that are very relevant in the context of, in the end of the day, impacting the inner Palestinian politics. Here is a big secret about the Middle East. The Middle East is not shaped by the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is shaped by the Middle East politics. And in the end of the day, Palestinians, the two major camps within the Palestinians, Fatah on the one hand and Hamas on the other hand, learn two basic facts of life. First, they will have to find some way to live one with the other because, as I said before, nobody is going anywhere. And second, any kind of a political agreement between the two must be and can be done only within a regional frame. And believe me, there will be no hugging and kissing over it.
We keep saying regional framework. So if we're talking region, the Gulf tends to be an important part in that. Qatar, certainly Saudi Arabia. I also heard from Shat on Saudi Arabia. They seem to think the Palestinian Authority says no matter what, Saudi Arabia cannot give up on the Palestinian cause publicly. They can never give in any way. They can't afford to do it. Do you agree, or is there a change in that sort of regional picture that you keep describing?
You say the magic word, publicly. Meaning, in the end of the day, beyond the scenes, the Saudis are sending very clear messages to the Palestinians. There is a major message coming out to the Palestinians in the last couple of years from the Arab world. The essence of the message is as follows. Guys, the Arab world says to the Palestinians, we are busy with our own challenges. In Egypt, in the Gulf states, in Lebanon, in Jordan, in Tunisia, and so on and so on. You should start dealing with your own problems in order to be able to enhance your situation. Obviously, the Saudis and the Egyptians, for example, will not abandon the Palestinian publicly, but the message that they send across to the Palestinians are getting more and more clear, by the way, including to the Hamas.